Guys, this time I am joined here on this video by Frank Elias, the watcher from the great band FEN, London-based, right? In
Yes.
England.
Yeah.
And who released? You see it on my, you saw it on my latest video. Their 7th LP, Monuments to Absence, this past Friday, which is absolutely phenomenal. So I just fell in love with this album. It was my personal most anticipated album for this summer. There was a big red cross on the 7th of July on my calendar. It was because of the release of this album, and I'm not disappointed at all. We're going to talk about that later. And I also own the previous one from 2019 or 20. Yeah, I think it's 2019.
It's right at the end of 2019.
So thanks a lot, Frank, to join me today. So I decided to reach out to you because I love to get in touch with the bands when an album inspires me like that, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So if for people who don't know FEN yet, FEN is let's say a post black metal, atmospheric black metal. It can be discussed, you know. It crosses a lot of boxes, so I cannot really define in which category we put it. But your music can be very atmospheric. You have some very black metal passages, you know, with very furious growls, you know, at times. But the identity, I think, is that it's composed of a lot of atmosphere there, and post-black metal-esque, landscapey, you know, this kind of black metal. So that's what I love. It's one of my favorite genres in metal. So it's your 7th album. And what could be maybe your inspiration? Because I read on internet that FEN, you named the band FEN because you grew up in a region in England that is called the Fens, which is a very mysterious landscapes with maybe swamps or things like that, a lot of water, a lot of flat lands, and you get your inspiration for your lyrics and your music over there, from there.
Yeah, I mean that's a way of putting it. Yeah, so myself and Grungeon, the bass player, and who also does vocals and does all the artwork, we're both brothers. We both grew up in that area. Probably from the age of about 10 to 18 when I moved to London. And yeah, I mean it's not that exciting a landscape. It's very flat. It's very similar to the Flanders areas in Belgium. Actually, it's drained land effectively. So you know, back in the 17th, 18th century, it was mainly underwater and it was swampland. It was then drained in the 1800s to create farmland. A lot of it's slightly below sea level. It's very very flat peat bogs. It's pretty bleak. Big skies. You know, you can sort of see for miles, and there's not really much happening there. And it's a fairly desolate, windswept area. You know, it's villages and towns are very far between. You know, miles between them. You can walk for hours and not really come across. Might come across the odd deserted barn or something like that. There really isn't much there. And growing up there, you know, when you're a teenager and you're becoming self-defined and you're learning your identity. You know, I wasn't the happiest adolescence, and I think the landscape came to almost embody what was going on internally as well. And allied to that, getting into extreme metal at that time, again, that was quite isolating, cut off from anyone else. There was no scene. I didn't really know anyone else who was into that sort of thing. There's no internet. So it's literally a case of buying the odd copy of Terrorizer magazine and going into CD shops and just desperately finding whatever extreme metal CDs I could. So all these things were sort of happening in the sort of early to mid 90s. And so when we went back to start playing a more atmospheric, kind of expansive form of black metal, essentially when we decided to form FEN, I tapped into all that thinking, all that kind of atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, yeah, that's my inspiration for this. It's to sort of communicate that sense of isolation, to communicate that sense of bleakness that you see in the landscape that's reflected to how you feel internally. And that was really trying to embody that feeling via the medium of atmospheric black metal, but also adding other elements into it. You know, we very consciously decided when this project began, we wanted to very deliberately put elements of post-rock in there and atmospheric instrumental. We felt there were parallels with what some black metal was achieving. Black metal, or some forms of black metal, are very much about an overwhelming wall of sound, about atmosphere and ambience, and bringing all that in and almost kind of drawing the listener into a world. And post rock and that sort of more atmospheric instrumental rock does the same sort of thing. It's quite loud, there's sensory overload, and we thought there's definitely, and also there's ebb and flow, it's dynamics. You know, for me, the best black metal is where it moves, there's peaks and troughs, and you get drawn into a journey. It's not to say there isn't value in black metal which just hammers you from start to finish. You know, every now and then that's exactly what you need. But for me, at its most captivating is when it moves through those dynamic elements. And again, that's very much where post-rock fits in. So at the time, you know, when we started, we weren't, this whole idea of post-black metal didn't exist. But I don't mind being described as that, because we very deliberately tried to put post-rock and post-punk and post-metal elements into black metal. So it'd be kind of a bit remiss of me to try and say, we're not a post-black metal band. I reject that term, because that, you know, we did try and we very overtly added that to it. But you know, that we've been going for 16, 17 years now, and I think I prefer to describe it as atmospheric black metal, because I think post-black metal has become a defined sound now. If something's described as post-black metal, you kind of know what to expect when you press play on the CD or put the needle into the vinyl. And I'm trying to avoid falling into those sort of those genre tropes. Okay. Same with the Black Gaze, which is so. And Monuments to Absence was kind of, again, a sort of, I wanted to sort of reconnect with the black metal that's at the core of the band's sound. You know, at the end of the day, we are a black metal band. That's what we're playing, and I wanted to bring that to the fore, while still weaving in those sort of more post-rock and progressive and atmospheric elements, but sort of weaving it in a slightly less obvious way, and slightly less overtly. Here's the progressive bit, here's the clean bit. I wanted to make it a little bit more kind of merged together, and highlight the aggression. Because I do think sometimes in post-black metal, it can lose the aggression sometimes. It can lose that sort of visceral fury that's important. Even if a band's blasting crazily, sometimes the melodies over the top can be a little bit too, not necessarily major key, but yeah, they're a little too uplifting, too much, if that makes sense. Yeah,
too symphonic maybe sometimes.
This is, I think you can have an uplifting elements in songs, but if there's too much of that, it starts to get a bit one note, you know, if everything's just about this kind of glittering. So trying to keep that balance and trying to keep the darkness there without just turning it into a full-blown black metal attack really was the key thing for this record. But I still think ultimately, going back to the start of the question, the band formed, there needs to be a thread, and you still need to be able to draw this album, you know, 17 years on, and we're, you know, learn a hell of a lot. We're emphasizing different elements of the sound. I still, every time we do an album, has to link back to why this band was started in the first place, what we were trying to say, and that atmosphere that was derived from the FEN. So there will always be bleakness. There'll always be there'll be a sense of despair or woe. There'll always be ultimately trying to drag the listener into some facet of that FEN world.
But then that's getting me to the next question. Do you have already plans to tour outside of the UK for the time being, or?
I would dearly love to, and I think from a timing perspective, you know, first half of next year would be perfect to come out. You know, maybe April, May next year to tour this record in Europe. And I've reached out to a few bands and sort of suggested tour packages. You know, bands who are putting out albums around the same sort of time as us, who are aligned. I mean, I don't want to give anything away because absolutely nothing set in stone at all. It's literally just, you know, talk over a beer effectively. But we'd love to. It is just getting more expensive, and if you're a tour promoter who is organizing, say, a month-long tour in Europe, and it's like, well, we could get FEN from the UK and have to mess around with visas potentially and carnets, and you know, it's already a little bit more of a cost to get them over because we have to fly them out here and blah blah blah. We could get them, or we could just book Dewego and a Freiheit who are down the road and can travel around the EU without any problems. So, you know, they'll be half the cost and they'll probably pay to the same size audience. So it's almost a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, definitely since hard Brexit kicked in, we've seen our European offers fall off a cliff, unfortunately. We used to play in Europe a lot, you know, and for me, you know, I still feel that's our primary audience, really. You know, our third ever show as a band was in Belgium. You know,
where?
At the Bebob, supporting Aglock.
Where? Sorry.
The Bebob, is it called the Bebob? Vosselar, is it called?
It's in the north. Then it's in the
It's
Dutch part. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes, it's up in the Flanders area. So that was our third ever show. It was there, and it was, you know, it was main support to Aglock. Yeah, and ever since we've played in Europe a lot. We don't tend to get as much support over here in the UK.
Ah, you played with Agalor?
Yeah.
That's what, oh wow, I didn't know.
Yeah, it was
You
back in 2008. Yeah, we didn't even have an album out at that point. It was 2008. They reached out to us, so they were supposed to be playing with Morning Beloved, and Morning Beloved had to cancel, but relatively short notice, a few weeks notice. And so they emailed us and said, hey, we've heard your EP, we like it. Do you want to be main support for a gig we're playing? I was like, yes, we do. We've only played 2 gigs, but yeah, we'll give it a go. It was, and yes, that's great. But that one, we got an absolutely fantastic reception, and ever since we've always felt, a real kinship with audiences in Belgium, Holland, Germany, Italy, places like that. So it is even more sort of painful to feel that it's more difficult for us to go and perform for our people who are into our stuff in Europe. I mean, we'll push for it now. That we have been in a little bit of a limbo the last couple of years. It's taken ages for this album to come out, and so we've been kind of biding our time. But now it's out. It's like, right, now we need to capitalize on this. So we will start getting the ball rolling. I'd love to do 2 or 3 weeks in the EU first half of next year. That's very much the goal. Hopefully it will happen.
If you would say, because you say that FEN tried, is trying to stay identical, to stay FEN with their music from start to finish, since the first album you try to keep the same music, the same identity. But if you say, what has evolved in your sound, in your music compared to the previous albums to this day? What is more present in your music now? What is less present? What do you think? Or is it really a pure, let's say, the same schemas, of what you were performing 15 years ago?
As I say, there's a golden thread that runs through all of them, and that's just the core principles of what we started out to do FEN. There's a reason we started to do FEN, and that's a core principle that runs through everything. But musically, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always refining. With each album you do, your body of work behind you almost acts as a way of helping steer the direction you go in. So every album we do, we look back on the previous album and try and put what we're doing currently in context. So off the back of Winter, for example, which was a huge, very progressive, and that was very, very deliberate. We when we set out to do Winter, it's like, let's do a really progressive album. Let's do like some sort of Yes album and not repeat any riffs, and do it as like one continuous song that goes through different movements. Then also for the back of that, so we don't want to repeat ourselves. We don't want to do exactly the same thing again and again. So let's focus on a different facet of the band. Let's focus on something a little bit more concise, a little bit more honed. So each time you are refining your art, and you want to do something different. You want to take different paths within an overall direction of travel. Because again, you don't want to be. I'm desperate not to become too predictable. Desperate not for it to be like, oh, they've just done. Yeah, it's 45 minutes of the same old stuff. That for me is just, I'd rather try and do something different and kind of crash and burn a little bit, perhaps, than just play it really safe and do, okay, yeah, we'll just do 6 songs with clean intros and then medium pace blasts and then a big climax at the end. Let's just do that 6 times. I don't want to sound blasé. That'd be kind of easy. And again, you wouldn't be pushing yourself. We always want to push ourselves. And some people may listen to some of the albums and think, I don't necessarily agree with that. But believe me, we do. We're always trying to push ourselves further and do ourselves as musicians and songwriters and the band FEN justice. We have, there's a pressure of responsibility on us now. This thing has become bigger than any of us as individuals. It's become bigger than any of our egos. We owe it to the concept of FEN, we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the people who've supported us to put as much effort in as we can and make it as good as we possibly can do it. So that's always the driver, and I think we have learned a hell of a lot. I think we've developed a lot. I think we've learned to bring we're always learning to bring the different parts of our sound together in a slightly more natural and seamless fashion, but occasionally make those transitions that are sort of out of the blue and unexpected arrive, but so that they're jarring. Sorry, that they're not jarring. If that makes sense? Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but it was you can do a kind of hard right in a song and suddenly switch to a different sound, and it be unexpected, and it work. And it's just learn, and that fine line between something like that being unexpected and surprising and engaging and jarring and weird and inappropriate, that line is incredibly thin. And you only really learn that through experience. Sometimes you can do it through instinct, but an element of instinct and experience together, which is, I think, where we are now. A lot of writing is still done on instinct. That sounds cool. Let's do this. Let's do that. But also that experience, like, actually, why don't we just experiment? Let's change that, or let's move that there and see how that sounds. And so it's bringing those two things together. So I'd say, yeah, experience and instinct. And the experience side is definitely where we are now. We've 7th album we've done, working on writing for the 8th album as we speak. And again, it's a 50-50 mix of kind of unbridled creativity. Here's some cool riffs, here's a cool idea, let's put that together. And then taking a slightly more intellectual, academic look at it and say, okay, does that work? Let's listen to it. Let's try as much as we can to take the subjectivity of us. We love our own music. Let's take let's take those glasses off and try and assess it objectively. Is it actually working? Is this as good as it could be, or do we need to work harder at this? Do we need to bin it? Actually, you can become a little bit attached to an idea, or attached to a riff, or attached to a song, and sometimes you need to take a bit of a sober look at it, or even another voice to turn around and say, put an arm around and say, it's not really working, is it? And it's like, no, maybe not. Okay, and again, that's something you learn, and that's something we've learned to sort of discuss. And sometimes you have to sort of try and say, actually, there's still something there, but we need to pull it apart and rebuild it. So yeah, we're learning, and obviously we're improving as musicians. I'd say that's something that's definitely true. We're learning how to sculpt the tones more effectively. We've spent a lot of time working on effects pedal setups and working on how to set things up to make. There's only 3 of us. There's only 2 of us playing melodic instruments. And we want to do as much as we can with just the 3 of us. Everyone needs to be putting 110% in to help create that soundscape. And again, that's something I think we've really developed over the last few records, is to do a lot more with less. And everyone is really knows their space. They know their sonic space. They know what they should be doing. I think the band's in a really strong place at the moment. And it's quite exciting. Each time you finish an album, it's exciting, because then you've got path ahead of where you go next, and you can take the learnings from the last album, the album before, where you've gone, and say, right, let's, it should only be getting better and better, in my view. So that's the learning, and that's where I see how we've developed.
And how was the album received for the moment by the critics, and etc.? What do you think people think about it? Do you already reviewed some reviews of your album?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. It's been an interesting. It's been sort of a mixed bag. I mean, a lot of reviews have, and it doesn't surprise me to talk about. Yeah, this is FEN's black metal record. They've gone full blown black metal on here, and I was obviously expecting that. We baited that kind of response. We started the album with a song that opens with a blast beat. And that was completely deliberate, because everyone expects a band like us to open a record with a shimmering, beautiful intro, or some sort of clean guitar. And I've got a lot of time for that. That can always... I
was actually amazed by that. When I discovered that this was the intro track, because I've been watching the video of the intro track for weeks on YouTube, waiting for the album. And I didn't expect, because I didn't spoil myself. So I didn't check the tracking list of the album before. I didn't expect at all for this track to be the intro track, because it's maybe one of the nervous, or maybe the most nervous track of the album, maybe, because it's as you say, it's a blast from the start, really from the start. And I didn't expect to be at the intro of the album. I was, wow, okay, they start with this one. Surprising.
Yeah, and again, this is the whole point. As I refer back to earlier, it's about presenting the unexpected, and it's about not repeating stuff. The last couple of albums we've done have all had big, and I just don't want to be typecast as, you hear this, the Pink Floyd of black metal. That's a huge compliment, because Pink Floyd are a great band. But as soon as you start hearing things like that, it makes me a little nervous. I'm sort of thinking, okay, we're now being pigeonholed as sounding a certain way. And I've got no problem with that. I think Gilmour is a fantastic player, and Pink Floyd are able to weave fantastic, guitar ambiences. But we've got other elements, and we've got other elements I want to showcase and highlight. And so I thought, we had that song. I said, I just said, yes, I think we should open with this. And they were both just like, yes, definitely. And I'm like, brilliant, we're all on the same page here. And it's great. It's a great feeling when you're all of the same mentality, because I was like, it's unexpected, it's different, and it sets the tone. And I do think, as I say, the reviews I've been reading so far very much, this is FEN, I've got black metal, it's very visceral, it's harsh. I don't think it is particularly harsh. I don't think that's necessarily a word I'd use. I think intensity is a word I would use. I think certainly with our drummer JG, obviously he has a background in quite intense black metal, playing in Craven Idol, and there's an element of kind of maximizing his capabilities on that, because obviously, yeah, he can play very fast blast and has really got that. And that's like, okay, well, let's really push that side of the band. But that's not all there is to it. And so I said to the others, I want there to be layers within this record, but layers that take a bit of time to reveal themselves, rather than just sort of standing on the rooftops going, hey, we're doing a progressive album, here we go, here's loads of clean guitars, here's some slow bits, here's some builds. That's fine, I don't mind that sort of stuff. But for me, the challenge on this album is to sort of weave that slightly more progressive nature into the black metal, into the sort of black metal. So it's almost, there's you know, the surface is black metal, but under the surface there's more stuff going on, different time signatures, other guitar lines just sneaking in, bass counter melodies, that kind of stuff, different accents. So that really was the approach we took on this record, and the reviews are picking up on it. The reviews by and large have been quite positive, you know, and it's one of those things that you get reviews quite close when an album comes out. I do wonder whether, if people stick with it, whether those reviews might change. You know, someone might come back and say, actually, I've given this another listen, and maybe it's not quite, you know, we all have that. We have a surface level appreciation of a record. Look, I used to write reviews, and you don't have, if you've got a big pile of stuff, you don't have a lot of time to spend a lot of time with each album. You can maybe listen to them
because there are so many, so yeah,
there's so much stuff coming out, and you maybe listen to it 3 or 4 times, and you have to make an assessment on that, and then you have to live with it, and then you might come back to that record 6 months later and spin it another couple of times and go, actually, this is really fucking good. You know, you might, you know, I've done it before. I've reviewed something else, yeah, this is pretty decent, yeah, it's all right, you know, 7 out of 10, and you come back to something about a year later and you're like, now this is making sense, shit, this is great, and but you've already, something's been etched in stone, and it's like, I wish I could have come back. Because I was actually doing an interview with a chap a couple of days ago, and it got delayed. We couldn't coordinate, so it was delayed by about 2 weeks. And he actually said, I'm really glad this interview has been delayed by a couple of weeks, because the original date we had scheduled, I'd only managed to listen to the album a couple of times, and now over the last 2 weeks I've listened to it a few more times. And he said, yes, so much more stuff has been revealed in that period, and I'm really glad that we can talk about it, because he's like, there's so much more to it than I was originally going to say, and now we can talk about it in more detail. So
yeah, but of course, because it's such a rich album, rich music, you cannot give really a clear opinion on everything after just one listen. You have to listen it several times, because you have
that very much was the intention when we set out on this one. We knew it was going to be, we knew we wanted to emphasize the intensity, but that was just part of it. That was just an element of it. That was just part of the delivery mechanism. You know, we did spend a lot of time rehearsing like material and refining it and adding little details. And even in the studio, we went in, we were very, very prepared. You know, we rehearsed exceptionally hard for this one, and I've never felt more prepared going into a studio. You know, I had notes with all the vocal lines were sort of pretty much structured, and I had notes with where certain effects pedals were going to be deployed and all this kind of stuff. And we went in, and the recording process was an absolute pleasure, because we all knew exactly what we were going to do, and it saved us time. So it meant that we had time to experiment. You know, get out. You know, let's put a guitar line on here with a fuzz pedal, and also let's do this. Let's you know, there's even some parts where our drum went wandering out in the countryside while we were doing some tracking, came back with a load of sheep bones that he found in the field, and he's like, I want to record these. So there's bits on the album where he's like rattling bones and I was like, yeah, we've got a bit of time because we were prepared. Some bands aren't like that. Some bands, you know, they'll book a studio without having anything really written. They might have a couple of riffs, one or two songs, like, yeah, well, we'll book a studio for 6 months' time, we should have everything sorted out about that. I can't work like that. I think my stress levels would go through the roof if I walked into a studio. I didn't really know what we were doing completely, because you're on the clock, you know, and there's only 3 of us, you know, so it's like everyone's got to work hard in there. So yeah, we like to be prepared when we go in.
And how much time did you stay in the studio for the whole album?
So this one was done in 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah. So it was focused. 10 focused days. There wasn't much mucking around. You know, we'd start at around 10:30, 11 in the morning, and probably do 12 hours tracking. Yeah, and then a few beers, watch some Wasp videos or something, go to bed, and then the next day the sort of same thing. So we really did. I think one night we had you have to give yourself a break every now and then, because you can get a bit. And one night we went, because we were recording in the middle of the countryside up in Wales. There's nothing for miles around, which is great. There's no real distractions, but you do have to. I think one night we were like, right, let's go to the local village pub, have some food, have a couple of beers, and just come away from it for a few hours, because you can get a little bit bogged down a bit.
Yeah. But in the same time, you have to keep your focus as well for the next day.
Yeah.
I think we don't realize, us non-musicians, I think we don't realize the work that it is to be focused like that for days in the studio. I mean, that must be so tiring, man.
It's exhausting. I know doing the lead guitar on this album was like, one night, so the guy who was producing it, Chris Fielding from the band Conan, he was producing the record, and he
because you do the guitars, you do the lead vocals plus the guitars.
Yes. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. But I do remember once Chris stayed with us in the band house one night. He's like, right, I've got the night off from the wife and the kid. So when we finish tracking, we'll have some beers. We'll play. There's like a pool table in there, and we did have a bit of a wild night. And then the next day, obviously, and the alarm goes. It's like, oh god, today's lead guitar. It's lead guitar today, isn't it? Oh no! And that was kind of painful actually, because that was probably the longest day of tracking after the least sleep with a crushing hangover, and that was like. That's probably not the best thing to have done. But you just have to. You haven't got a choice. You have to dig deep, and it's like, well, we've got to do it. We're here. We've got. This material has to be recorded. I've got to get through it. And we did. But it was the moment. Some bits were hard. Some moments were harder than others. But it was great. I enjoyed recording when you're well prepared and you can just hear the music coming together and you can hear it building. And
that must feel good.
Songs you've lived with for 12, 18 months, and it's like, oh, here it is at last, and it's sounding great through the studio monitors, and let's put some more layers down. It's coming together. It's a great feeling. I guess after so much effort, it's like the reward of so much work. But. I wanted to ask you as well, because coming back to the structure of the album, when I said that it was really surprising to get this track as an intro track, because especially when you get to the second track of the album, which is, I think, if I remember right, the title track, Monuments to Absence, the way it starts is really wow. But that sounds like an intro of an album, And so you have Scoring Ignorance starting the album for 6 minutes and a half. And then you get to Monuments to Absence. It's so atmospheric in the beginning. And then I was a little lost at first, I'd say, okay, we start like that. And then second track, it's really calm and, and so atmospheric, etc. How did you build the order of the tracks? Did you take some testing? Maybe Monuments to Absence in the first place was maybe your intro track, or maybe it was at the outro track, or was the order of the tracks really defined really at first? It kind of came together pretty easily, to be honest. In terms of, I always pretty early on we made the decision that Scarring Ignorance was going to be the opener. I was like, the Deadlight opened. So the Deadlight was supposed to be a bit more of a direct album. That was supposed to be the one that was going to be, because after Winter, which was huge and sprawling, we wanted to make one that was concise, self-contained. It didn't really play out like that. It ended up being quite posty, quite glittering, and the intro, there's a long intro track on there, which I'd had written for a while, and I was like, I really want to get this down on an album. So actually that didn't happen. And so I thought, no, this time we really have to go for the throat from the get-go. So yeah, Scarring Ignorance was written. I was like, that is going to be the opener. So that was kind of set in stone quite early on. And All Is Lost is one of the earlier tracks we wrote for the album as well. And I was like, that's going to be so the book at the start and the finish was we made that decision before really anything else has been really taken an enormous amount of shape. So it was then just a question of, okay, there's the start point of the journey, there's the end point of the journey. We now need to put the journey together. So most of the thought was on how do we put the other pieces together, and how do we get a logical flow there. Having Monuments as a second track, I thought was quite nice. I think it segues in quite nicely, because there is, as you say, there is a sort of fade in intro, and it does have a sort of, but it quickly, we get back into the intensity pretty quickly. That's just a sort of, it's a pause for breath. And the thing is, whilst it is quite atmospheric, I think it's quite ominous. I think it's one of the, it's not a sort of beautiful, uplifting intro piece to Monuments to Absence. I think it is quite ominous and almost a little bit sinister in some respects. There's a drone there in the background, and it just feels like you
can feel that something's going to happen.
It just feels like it's almost like the sort of muttering of sort of ancient spirits, kind of like just lurking in the background, making dark promises. And I think that for me was like, that's going to work quite nicely to then bring that back in. So as I say, so we had our start and end points defined fairly early on, and then the rest of it just sort of slotted into place fairly naturally. I mean, we always think about track order. I think it's hugely important on albums, and this one, with eight songs, there are many permutations you can have there. But I think it worked. I think, when it came to listening to the album from start to finish, I'm like, yeah, that is
Makes sense.
very much the order. I can't imagine it not being in that track order now. I can't even conceive of those songs not being in where they are in the journey.
But what is a tough job for me, for example, is that I couldn't. If you ask me to pick what is my favorite track of the album, I couldn't say, because each track contains so many interesting stuff, and I think it's the kind of album, well, to me, that it really has to be listened from start to finish. It's not the same the kind of music that you take one album and you put that in a playlist, when you're driving your car or something. I think it's FEN's music. It's something that shall I listen to FEN? Okay, then let's pick an album and play it from start to finish. I couldn't isolate one track and put that in the playlist to go at the gym, and listen to a FEN track amongst of different artists, in the same playlist. I think it's not to be isolated as a track. I think it's a whole. Mm-hmm. It's a whole. Let's say that I consider it like a whole 67-minute song cut in 8 tracks. I mean,
in that sense, there's an element of what, how Winter was kind of conceived there. I mean, I agree with you on that. They were written as separate tracks, but I think there's such a cohesion between them, and again, it's very deliberate. But they were written with each other in mind, if that makes sense. And it's we're an album band. I know I've said this, and we're kind of almost a concept album band. Every album is a loose concept record. There's always a thread running. So I talked about threads earlier, a golden thread running through the band's history. But each album has its own thread as well, which then feeds into that master thread, if you will. And I agree with you. It's great to hear that, because I feel the same way. I think even if you start listening to a track a bit later on in Monuments to Absence, there's a sense of compulsion to hear the next one and then keep going on that journey. So it's okay, I'm going to drop in on track 4, and then suddenly, before you know it, you're getting to the last track. And I think it's supposed to be digested that way. Is my feeling on it, and it's supposed to create that cycle and draw you in.
So mission completed.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that. It is nice to hear
really that. The way, I think it's really the way. And when you get to the last track, All Is Lost, I think it's really the perfect way to close the album, because that track is so atmospheric. But also in the second half of the track, when you start really these black metal vocals, again really full of anger, full of, I cannot say full of energy or anger or something. It's really the perfect way to close up the album. I think I would say that All Is Lost is maybe, if I had to pick one, even if I'm telling you, each track is great, but I think that All Is Lost is really my favorite. If I had to, I just love it. I just love that.
That's great to hear. I mean, that is interesting, and it's not the most immediate one on there, but it's definitely. For me, it always felt like it was going to be the closing piece. And I remember when we were building up in the rehearsal studio and adding the vocal layering to it, and Jessel's drumming he was that particularly on the very last riff, because obviously it plays the same riff for quite a while at the end. But the fact is, the dynamic shift on it. There's different drum fills, different drum patterns, and then there's layering that's coming in. I remember there's a genuine sense of excitement in the rehearsal. It's like, this isn't just the climax of the song. This is the climax of an album happening here. And it's like, this has got to be how we finish it. So we've got to make it bigger, bigger. When we recorded it, it's like more guitars, more vocals on it. So we play it live. I mean, I don't know what we're gonna. Yeah, if we even do play it live. I mean, I'd like. I mean, that goes back to something I was thinking with the others. I'd like to play this album live in its entirety. We've only ever done that once. When we released Dustwalker, we played the entirety of Dustwalker from start to finish.
You played the entire? Yeah.
We did an album launch gig here in London at the Black Heart, and we played the whole album start to finish. I'd kind of like to do that with this record at some point. It's a very indulgent thing to do.
That would be great. Sign me in.
It's one for the people. You've got to like this. Like I mentioned, you see some bands do that, and it's like, it's a bit of a middle finger to your fans who are expecting to hear the hits and the classics. And I'm like, yeah, but we're in the genre of atmospheric black metal. It's not about hits. It's not about Exactly. It's not about we've got to come and hear the classics. I see a band like Maiden. Of course they've got to play The Truther. Of course they've got to play Fear of the Dark.
You cannot compare. It's not the same.
But for us, I'm like, are those expectations really there, or is it? If we put an album out on it and people really are into it, and we feel it's a cohesive journey that actually needs to be delivered in its entirety, why shouldn't we do that? So there's
that would be great, man.
But we'll see. It is 67 minutes, and it's hard work as well. It's an intense one to play. There isn't a lot of you know, there's not a lot of moments where we can sort of sit back and sort of breathe. There's quite a lot of it is pretty demanding. So
yeah, it's
we're not getting any younger. Let's be honest. So
come on, you still have plenty of years, you know.
we will see. Well, our drummer's a bit younger actually, so that probably helps. So.
but then if you were like, did you already you know, talk with the band about if you have to play just a selection of the tracks for this album, which songs would be played live? You know already, or it's?
Yeah, I think obviously we put three pre-release tracks out for the album. So obviously Scouring Ignorance. I mean, we've been playing Scouring Ignorance live for about 18 months.
Okay.
There's footage of us playing it live on the net. So that's been out there for a while. And obviously we did a video for that. So that would definitely be a track we play, and it's quite short. So you can put it in the set. And I think Truth is Futility.
This one is great.
When we rehearse that always the energy in the rehearsal room just goes up. It goes up and up and up, and particularly for the big mid-section breakdown. That's a really nice. And that's a bit where we can be a little bit more freeform. That actually affords us some of that slightly more organic, you know, structure. We can sort of muck around with delay pedals and feedback and stuff. And then when it comes back in with that sort of quite heavy riff, there's always really works from a dynamic perspective. So definitely those two, possibly Wracked because we put it out as a single, and that's quite direct. Like I say, it is. The frustrating thing is, you know, for a band like us, you put a new album, because the other guys in the band were talking, oh, should we play some more obscure songs from our back catalogue? I was like, well, look, if we go on tour, say we go on a tour with a bigger band, so say we go on tour with Enslaved or something like that, we're going to be playing realistically for 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. If our average song length is 8 minutes, that doesn't give us much to play with. No, so I said, look, you know, so that actually structuring a live set to represent this album effectively, but also make sure that we do play some songs from the past that, you know, that always go down well live and we want to still represent. That's probably going to be the biggest challenge that faces us over the next 12 to 18 months.
Because the average length for your tracks are 7-8 minutes, maybe on average. If you play 45 minutes, it's too short, man.
6-7 songs. So this is, and some of the, you know, we always like to play the song Men Here off of Carrying Skies. That's always works really well as a set closer. That really gets things working nicely. And that's 12 minutes, you know. so a quarter of your set gone already. So it's like, oh fucking hell. I mean, the thing is, if we do a headlining show or headlining tour, then we can be more expansive. You know, and we can play. You know, we can play for an hour and a half, sometimes hour and 45, and it's hard work. But you know, you can fit a few songs in there. But yeah, it's a festival set or a tour support set. You know, 45, 50 minutes. Do yourselves justice. It's like shit. You have to be quite ruthless with what you choose to play. And we're having these conversations now. We are going on tour in the UK in November with Harakiri for the Sky.
Really, you're playing with Harakiri? Oh my god!
Yeah. No, we met them. We met them before. We met up with Matthias and what's the other chap's name? Jimbo, is it? We met up with them when we played in Austria last year. They came backstage because they know the guys from Frost Moon Eclipse. So yeah, we ended up going back to Matthias's flat until 4 or 5 in the morning, getting wrecked. And yeah, we've got on with them really nicely, really nice guys. So they're doing 6 dates in the UK with Elend. So I think there's like another Australian.
Oh, Elend, they are great as well.
Yeah. So I think Elend and Harakiri this guy share some members, so they're coming over, and we're gonna open for that touring package. So that'll be quite cool. That's 6 dates in the UK, and we'll get to showcase the stuff of this album. But again, I think our set
is it in a big venues or
reasonable venues? Yeah, so sort of 400 to 500 capacity.
Oh yeah,
so not bad. But yeah, we'll have 45 minutes each night. So we're going to have to be, and we obviously need to promote this record. So it's going to have to be at least 2 or 3 songs off it, and then 2 or 3 songs from the back catalogue, and then good night. And the amp off.
I want more.
Yeah. So and this is, and you can't muck around. Yeah, and this is the other thing we've learned is you learn professionalism, and you've been going around for a bit, and you can't dick about and run over set lengths and take ages to get your stuff off stage and milk it. You know, you know where you are. If you're on a touring package, you're the first man on out of 3. Yeah. No. Of course, when you're on stage, you do your absolute best and you play it like you're headlining in front of 80,000 people. But around it, be professional, be respectful of venues, be respectful of the other people who are on the tour. You know, just do your job. And this is something again we've learned. You know, you've got to be, particularly in those sort of setups. It is a business in some respects. You know, you get into the venue, get set up, get your gear sorted, tune, string, make sure everything's working. You know, then you can start drinking.
Because it's something that I really respect from the artists, because when I see that when I'm working backstage, you know, at the venue or near my place, and then when I see the bands go up on the stage perform like 40 minutes, and then after have to fill their vans, you know, with all their stuff, their instruments and everything, you know, to put back everything in order after only 40 minutes. I say all these efforts. Yeah. Just to play 35, 40 minutes. It's crazy when you think about it.
It is, yeah. I mean, this is it. I mean, you do that, I think about flying gigs we've done in the past, you know, you fly all the way we flew to Canada for a show, you know, for an hour, you know, you're talking 8 or 9 hours on a plane, getting driven around.
Oh, no.
2 nights in a hotel and you're playing for an hour, you know.
Patience.
You've got to try not to think about stuff like that sometimes, because you can over pressurize yourself. You think everything that's gone into this, and now we've got 60 minutes at most to do this justice. But it is a lot of work, and it's good that you've seen the other side of it. But look, we enjoy it as bands. We wouldn't do it if we're not making any money.
Yeah, of course.
We wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it. You know?
Yeah. I guess that for the band, it's the playing live is really the how do you say in English? The cherry on the cake, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, this is the thing for us. It's like, we've always wanted to be able to do our music live, you know, but we always wanted to do it live in an honest way. You know, a lot of bands use backing tracks and laptops and things like that. And I'm sort of thinking, I don't want to go down that road. You know, I want to play live, and I want to play live, you know, and there are layers on our records that we don't reproduce live, because to do it would either mean having a couple of laptops and therefore the drummer play to a click and we lose that organic element, or we have 3 or 4 other musicians join us on stage, and then it becomes more people to organize, becomes far more expensive, so you become less, you know, no one's going to book you if you're not going to draw enough. So for us, it's like, look, we'll play live, and when FEN plays live, it's going to be a more direct, stripped down interpretation of what we do. But yeah, we still go to town in trying to recreate that. You know, we use a lot of effects pedals. I run in stereo to create as big a sound as possible, and all this kind of bits, all this stuff. And that works I think that works for us. I think that is us being us. That's what it sounds like in the rehearsal room. So that's the reality of the situation. When you're recording, you have the luxury of doing all this stuff, but the reality of us rehearsing is 3 guys in a rehearsal studio. I go back to that thread. You know, that's how it started, 2005, 2006. 3 guys in a rehearsal studio just trying to make some sound. That's what it is, you know?
Well, cheers to that. Cheers to that. I have one last question, and I will give you back your freedom, because I know it's Sunday and you're to prepare your vacation. So just one question: Monument to Absence. What does that mean? Why such a title? And what's the idea between this title? So
there's anger running through this record, and I think that's pretty evident. You know, there's a lot of red color that's there, and that red can symbolize a few things. You know, symbolize obviously the red of rage is one thing, but also it's the red of blood. You know, and there's a lot of blood that's been shed due to the folly and hubris of mankind. So this album really, we've touched on these subjects before, certainly on Carrion Skies. And songs like Our Names Written in Embers, we talk about the folly of humanity, the inability to learn from mistakes, you know, constant cycles of conflict and resource appropriation that always ends badly. It ends up with the innocent being trampled into the mud, and those who control the power structures just consolidating their wealth and consolidating their position. Monuments to Absence goes further. It talks about that in more detail. It talks about that. And so a lot of the tracks are discussing some facet of human folly. And Monuments to Absence itself is really about the drive and the sort of the inclination of the powerful to craft massive totemic, you know, structures to kind of to celebrate their own glory, you know. But what is actually going to happen with that? If that's your legacy, it's just going to come to dust. And it's kind of derived from a lot of it derives from the central theme of that poem Ozymandias, you know, look upon Ozymandias and just look upon us in despair, and it's just like a massive statue that's fallen apart in the desert. Nobody knows who this is. Meaningless. It's just a hubristic structure. And I think that's quite a powerful image. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, I look around, I work in the city in London, and you've got all these massive buildings and stuff. And it's like, what are they going to be in 2,000 years time? Yeah, if we carry on like we are, and we burn this planet to a crisp, they'll just be dust bowl, or, you know, withered skeletons after a nuclear holocaust, or just the little tips sticking out above water because we'll have melted the ice caps. And that really, for me, that's one symbolic idea. That's monuments to absence. There's nothing left. You've just got absence, and these monuments really they're just hubristic structures that symbolize, you know, and the absence, you know, when I talk about absence, it really is, in this instance, is absence of life. If the human beings have become extinct, and all we've got left are buildings, or, you know, cities, roads, whatever it is, pointless because we're dead. So there's that absence, but also absence of spirituality, absence of, you know, I think a lot of people shuffle through life and they create these sort of materialistic totems to sort of try and reinforce their legacy because of the absence within themselves. A lot of people really are empty vessels. They peel back the layers, and they end up staring at a kernel of complete emptiness. So when I talk about monuments, it's not necessarily just a physical structure. It's not just something that someone's built to try and celebrate how rich they are. It could be a monument, could be an idea, it could be a credo, a belief. Monotheism is a key example, and there's a lot of areas on this album where monotheism really is put in the firing line, because I think it's a dreadful thing. You know, I think it's responsible for some of the worst excesses and some of the worst inhumanities our species is capable of inflicting upon itself. And these are monolithic things. You know, the big monotheistic religions on this planet, they are monuments to absence in the most explicit sense, because they're the absence of any real morality. It's a credo to a made-up code and it is why people behave like they do. And it's really is, you know, if I stick this out, then when I die, I'll end up having a lovely time in some made-up fairyland, etc., etc. And that really sings of the absence at the kernel of the human condition more than anything else, really. I mean, how much absence does there have to be in your life to make that your credo? Where upon oblivion, things will get better. I mean, that's a desperate situation to be in, isn't it?
Exactly. But I get the idea. I was thinking something like that. You know, when I first learned about the title of the album, I say, okay, I think that the idea behind it is going to be that. You know, so I was not far from the truth. So it's great. Great to know. Guys, this is Monuments to Absence, so the 7th full-length LP from FEN. It's out. It's been out on July the 7th under Prophecy Productions record, and I just recommend that you listen and buy this record. For the time being, it's my #1 album of 2023 so far. It's only July, but still, I had a few crushes since January this year. It's a rich year for metal, I think, in all categories. But this one, for the moment, is the album of the year, which really spoke to me, which embarked me for the biggest journey since the beginning of 2023. So for the time being, it's my album of the year. So I just recommend that you guys discover this album and discover FEN previous releases if you don't know the band yet, and because they are so talented, it's such a great music. So it was my pleasure, Frank, to have you on board for this video. We learned a lot of stuff from yourself about your band and your album, and maybe we can meet up in the future if you come to Luxembourg or South Belgium, or even in in the Netherlands. It's not far from my place as well. I will keep an eye on your website and on your Instagram, just to see if you're coming soon near to my place, and maybe we will share a beer, grab a beer together, and just say hi. And that was such a great time, and thanks a lot for having been there for the channel and for me personally. Much appreciated, because I just love what you do, man, and keep it up. And
thank you. No, thank you for the conversation. Thanks for the kind words and the support. Yeah, it means a lot. So I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I'm glad it's resonating with you. So good chat. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll meet up over a beer, and we'll be playing live near you somewhere. Fingers crossed. So.
Yeah, one day it will happen. I'm sure about that. Thanks a lot. That was Melo, and that was Frank from FEN. See you guys. Thank you again, Frank, and maybe see you later. Hopefully.
Cheers. Take care.
Ciao.